Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. My name is Sarah Jamansky. I'm your host. I'm an extension educator for Purdue University Extension in Perry County, Indiana. I've been raising dairy goats since 1999 and did my master's work with sheep and goats at Fort Valley State University. And joining me today is Alicia Rogers, who is my fellow extension educator from Northern Indiana. And she married into sheep and goats about 8 years ago, and her husband's been involved for much longer than that. So I'll let Alicia go ahead and get started.
All right, thank you, Sarah. So today we're kind of talking about how to do kind of photography, videography, things like that for our small ruminants. Because as the title says, a picture is worth 1,000 words. You can get plenty of bad pictures just to get a good picture, but each one says something about your animal. So we're going to talk about how to kind of set up those photos, both from the photographer standpoint and from the handler and animal standpoint today. So kind of our purpose of having a good photo or video is whether you're taking them for use on a website, a business card, a magazine ad. Basically, a bad photo is worse than no photo at all. So if you have photos of your animals just looking dirty in the mud, which I know most of us have, most springs, our animals don't look the best, especially if they're coming off of the pastures, things like that, to come into the barn. So in many cases, your potential buyer's initial contact with your animals is going to be through photos or videos. A lot of times, if you're trying to sell on Facebook or the Vimo or whichever other sites there are out there, if you don't have a photo, that's usually the first thing they ask to see. So because there are very few professional livestock photographers, it's easy to learn to take great pictures yourself. Professional livestock photographers can cost a little bit of money. So learning how to do these photos yourselves can save you quite a bit on your budget. And it really isn't hard. It just takes practice. So our question we're going to ask today is, how do we take our photos from the left to making them look like the photo on the right? So the photo on the left is actually myself showing one of our recorded grades back when she was a dry yearling. She was obviously having a very bad day. She ended up going reserve grand for recorded grades, and the judge said she would have gone grand except for her attitude that day. So we just highlighted that there. Versus the doe on the right, this was one of the Oberhausen National ADGA champions from a couple of years ago. Beautiful photo of her, just a beautiful photo overall. So a few things we want to think of before we even get our animals out, before we even have our photo or video day, is kind of teaching your animal to pose, how to stand still, how to cooperate when under collar. So these are some great photos from Sarah showing a little doeling that was not the most cooperative that day, it appears. More interested in what some of the other goats are doing, some of her pen mates and things like that. So having obviously distractions, things like that out of the way can really help. So there are very few things that are more frustrating for a photographer and a helper and the animal themselves than trying to take a photo or a video of an animal that refuses to stand still or cooperate when being worked with. I know for us personally this year with our dairy goats, with a lot of our shows being canceled up to this point, honestly, a lot of my doelings this year have not been worked with yet. And I really need to do that because they're going to be a handful to handle here pretty quickly. So the other thing you want to look up is to spiff up your sheep or goats before shooting, again, pictures or videos. Basically, you want to pretend that they're going to a show. You want to show them in their best light to be able to show them just as they are, as beautiful as they can be. So in this photo here, we see a nice son and doe. On the left, she's clean, she's been clipped. She looks like she's ready for a show. Versus on the right, dirty, kind of hairy. Still a very nice looking doe, but you kind of get lost on kind of the dirt on her, the unkept look, things like that. A few other thoughts. Basically, photographing our sheep and goats takes some time. and a little forethought in order to get that $1 million shot. It's very rare that you can just go out there in the field, take a picture, and it be the one that works best for you. Not always works. So they don't always happen right away. You may need to take hundreds of pictures to be able to find the one that makes your animal pop, that makes them stand out, makes them look like the best that they can be. So the biggest thing is to have patience. That's the biggest thing. Once you get frustrated, your animal can feel that energy. They'll stop cooperating. It just gets frustrating for everybody all around when you lose your patience and you get frustrated. That's why it's best to, when you're looking at weather and things like that, if you can do it in the cool of the day, or if you're staffing photos in the winter, doing it someplace warmer, just thinking of those sorts of things as well. So the following are a few other things to think about before bringing your animals out to be photographed or videoed. You want to kind of strive for simplicity. Simple is best. So breathtaking scenery is fine in its own place, but you want to draw attention to your animal, not to everything else that may be going on. You also want to try to avoid hanging ribbons off of your sheep or goats. If you want to highlight their achievement, that's great. Lay it on the ground in front of them or on a hanger behind them, somewhere like that. But try not to cover up your animal. This is a great example of a grand champion. It's like this was a market lamb. Looking at the undercarriage. So grand champion market lamb. Looks like it was a great lamb, but we can't see it. Same with these two photos. So these are from shows the last few years. The one on the left was one of our alpine bucks. Where his ribbon is hanging, it really distorts his neck, makes it look kind of really weird. The background and also myself kind of blend into him as well. So it makes just his coloring, his legs, everything just look really weird and distorted. Versus on the right-hand side is my husband. And again, one of our recorded grade does. Great doe, that'd be a great picture, except for the ribbons kind of hiding her heart girth area. The flowers in the background kind of pop out weird, kind of just take away from her coloring overall. Maybe being a little critical as well. On the side, I'm also a 4-H photography judge, so I'm really nitpicky on my photos. So if I seem like I'm being a little bit critical, it's just that photo judge coming out in me. Here we have a few other great examples. So the top left, we've got Sonnenbuck. Looks like a great, powerful buck. However, the ribbon's kind of hiding his heart girth, kind of hides the area where his shoulder ties into his back. So kind of distorts that a little bit. On the right-hand side here, we have a really nice hair ewe lamb, but the banner's pretty much completely covering her. We don't have a helper holding on to the banner, so she's not set up well. So it's kind of hard to really see why she won the banner. Same with a market weather on the bottom. He's fairly set up, but the point of the banner hanging down kind of creates a weird top line to his back. I mean, you follow it along, and if you're not paying attention, it looks like his back just does a weird divot there. So these are all some kind of examples of what to do with ribbons potentially. So nice does on both sides. They've got the ribbons on the grounds next to it, so we can still see the does themselves and still see the ribbons that were won. So we also want to make sure to watch our backgrounds. This is probably the biggest thing. So avoiding things like distant buildings, any vehicles, fence posts or utility poles, any other goats milling about, because we want, again, our focus to be on that goat. We don't want things in the background distracting us. And then avoiding clutter, so board piles, disintegrating fences, just miscellaneous junk, things like that. And then we also want to try to avoid horizontal lines, and we'll see why here in just a moment. So, got these two photos of different bucks. You can see on the left, a great little boar buck. We'd purchased him a couple years ago, but this photo just does nothing to show his real power. The angle's just off on him, so you can see the powerful front chest, but it appears that his back end just kind of shrinks up and he's not even all the way through. You also have the board in the background, the horizontal fence, and that line draws your eye to his top line, we can see here, and it makes it appear more dipped and curved than what it really should be. That's why I want to try to avoid horizontal lines, because it can distract our eye from what the backs really look like. Here on the right, we have a little La Mancha buck we bought last spring, and you can just see the massive amounts of clutter that you normally find on a farm. It's just one of those photos that we took real quick, didn't really pay attention to what was going on everywhere. He gets lost with the straw and the soil, tires in the background, my son's bike, my teal Crocs, all of that just kind of distracts from the photo overall. So these are a few others. These are all great photos. These are all photos that most of us would use for advertising and things like that. But there are a few things in each of these photos that I'm going to kind of nitpick over. So kind of the top left, we have here a Nigerian dwarf buck. Great buck, great stance. The photo appears to be just a little bit crooked, so it looks like he's kind of leaning uphill, which we want, but it looks a little distorted to that. We also have our horizontal line there on the barn between the stone and the steel. So even though he has a great flat top line to him, it just kind of distorts his shoulders and the tie-in of his shoulders to his back a little bit. On the top right, again, a beautiful photo of this Bordeaux, but you have that telephone pole in the background. You have those weeds in the foreground that are sticking up and kind of distracting from us seeing her udder, her legs, all of those sorts of things. So it's just, the doe itself is beautiful. The lighting is beautiful on that photo. It's just the foreground and background for me are very distracting. The bottom left, again, a very common photo for kids that are doing shows. A lot of times they'll have these backdrops. My issue with this photo, very powerful ewe, very great photo of the ewe, but the wording in the background, the Indiana stock show, you can start to see the top of the Indiana on that row just behind her back. And it really kind of distracts you and kind of makes you, looks like her back has more divots than what it should. And then on the lower right, we've got this little boar buck. Again, great picture of that buck, but the snow really distracts from that buck itself. It just doesn't really pop. Now, if we were to take that background, crop it, take out the snow, take out that background, and just add in a solid color background, that would be a great photo of that animal. We also want to look at color complements. So posing a light colored animal against a dark background, such as a solid bank of trees, or posing a dark colored animal against a light background. And we'll see why here in a second. So we can see here, all of these animals, great animals, but they just kind of blend into their backgrounds. They kind of hide. We can't see them very well. Come on. So same with this here. We see here on the top left, this Dorset blends into kind of the light sky instead of standing out, versus on the right-hand side, same animal, but you take the picture against the tree and that animal really stands out. Also on this lower, this cross buck here, we see the break in the tree line kind of plays with your eyes a little bit. Kind of try to avoid that major change in the background if possible, because we have the strong, kind of the dark background on his shoulders, on his flank and back from there, but that middle section kind of gets lost with that change in the skyline. Again, these are all beautiful does in each of their own rights, but the backgrounds really kind of tend to kind of make or break the photo. So we have on our top photos here, on the top left, we have kind of a little bit lighter colored doe against this kind of multicolored muted background, but she just kind of gets lost. You can see her, but you've got to kind of really look for kind of for different points, her colors, things like that. Versus this lower doe, this solid black doe, really stands out against this lighter background. On the right-hand side, we see from the NAIL, National or North American International Livestock Expo background. We see on the right, kind of a gray chocolate colored doe. She does okay with that background, but it's not doing anything special for her. Versus this white La Mancha doe at the bottom really makes her pop out with this green background. So you can see here, background definitely makes a difference. The position of your animal also makes a difference, not just the position of yourself, position of the handler, but the position of the animal themselves. So you want to choose a level spot or one where your sheep or goat is standing with its forequarters or its front part going slightly uphill or on flat ground. So stand your animal on wood, cement, or light shavings or very short grass so you're not hiding their feet. So these are some great examples from Sarah. You can see on the left-hand side, this guy is kind of standing on a slight downhill. Grass is kind of covering their feet. So it's still a great picture, but maybe not the most flattering. Versus on the right-hand side here, we can see they're kind of standing on an incline. Shows a little bit more power, a little more balance to the animal. Shows kind of a nice flatter top line as well. We can see the same here on these lambs. So on the left, we have a lamb that has his feet hidden by the straw. Looks like a powerful lamb, but you don't really see kind of the pasterns in the feet and what they look like and how they tie in together. Versus a lamb on the right, you can see the feet, the legs all the way down. You can see kind of the pasterns, if they're strong or not. So it really helps having their feet visible. And you also want to have recruited help. So unless you photograph your sheep or goats at liberty, you'll definitely need a capable assistant to help pose it. So you'll need a second assistant potentially to help grab and hold the animal's attention as well, especially if you want to highlight their handsome profile, if you want those ears perked, you just want them kind of focused on something, that really helps. So you're going to have videos, especially if your animal kind of running loose in the pen, with nobody kind of handling the animals, it helps to kind of keep them a little bit focused, to have somebody in there kind of off to the side, that can help kind of move them about as needed freely. And then the other thing with the recruited help is if they are going to be in the photos, even if their faces aren't going to be in there, you still want them to dress as though they're going to a show. So like I said, even if it's just part of their shirt, part of their legs, even their feet, you want them to look more professional, versus the one photo I had with that La Mancha buck of being in capris and Crocs, not the most professional look. On picture day, you want to remember to pack extra memory cards. So if you're using a digital camera, you want to make sure you have enough space for all your pictures you're going to be taking. It's one of the great things about having phones, iPads, things like that nowadays, is we can just take and use those. But you don't always get the best pictures. It's easier to kind of have a camera that you can play with the settings a little bit. You want to allow plenty of time to capture that perfect shot if you need to. So allot for at least 1 hour, potentially 2 hours for your animals, with the different lighting, with the different settings, setting your animal up, trying to find the best backgrounds. It could take a little while to find that magic shot. And then have everything set up and ready to go before you even bring your animal out. You want to make sure that you're ready, that the background's ready, that your light is ready, everything's ready to go, so your animal doesn't have to stand there and wait. Keeping your animals comfortable in their pen will help benefit both the handler and the photographer and the animal themselves. And so lastly, real quick, this is a picture from one of my local boar goat producers. They do a lot of sales online. So you can see this was during, I think it was about February, March timeframe. It's a little bit cooler, but it is photos being taken in the barn. They do have that nice turf grass base on it. So you do still have the appearance of the grass, but you're still able to see the feet and the legs. You've got the nice solid background. It still looks like wood boards, but they're more vertical lines, not horizontal. We've got lighting coming from every direction, so it's not creating shadows or weird angles, things like that. And then you can see kind of in the foreground, the prepping pen or prepping stand, there we go. So they obviously were working on the animal, getting that picture ready while setup was happening, so they could take that animal straight from the stand up to the stage and go from there. The other thing I want to point out is you can see the stage is raised. So that way the photographer or the camera is at the same level as that animal, versus having the photographer have to crouch or stand at weird angles. So, all right, Sarah, do I need to give you capabilities or you just want, oh, you're muted.
You'll be in control of the slides, so if you can go ahead and advance us. Okay, so once you're ready to take those photos, you need to try to get the animal's attention, because nothing ruins a photo like an animal that's ears are drooping or that's just kind of distracted with anything and everything but the camera. So to get the best view of your animal in your picture, you need those ears forward. You either want them looking straight forward or towards you. And so you can use a bag of props that you can keep with your camera to try to get those animals to pay attention. Alicia, could you? Okay. So some options are a kazoo, so a little noisemaker, or a plastic bag on a stick. Keys, a lot of people use keys. So that's a big favorite. But you need to make sure that whatever it is, it doesn't need, you don't want the animals too familiar with it because they'll just ignore it. But you don't want something that's going to startle them either, because a startled animal doesn't help very much either. So both extremes are bad for photography. So you don't want a startled animal, but you don't want a bored animal. So if you can see the head profile on the goats in the top left, you can see that they're alert, looking towards something. So you want to try to get that alertness in your picture. And so you can see in the sheep the difference in the ear posture, or it's kind of some different ways of getting their attention. One with just waving the hand, and the other waving the hand with an object. Now it looks like the sheep may actually be a little afraid of that object because you see how the ears are back. You really want to try to get those ears forward for the best look of the animal and for the head profile. Okay, so when we think about light, we want to remember a few tips. The big thing is you don't want shadows across the animal, particularly your shadow across the animal. So you want the sun at your back or slightly over one shoulder. That way the shadows aren't getting in the way of the appearance of the animal. And we'll get into that with some photos in a little bit. If you have an automatic flash, use it, unless you are really familiar with your lighting and you have shutter speeds on your camera that you can use. But if you're trying to use a slow shutter speed, it may work against you because animals don't like to hold still for very long. And so you're probably better off with better lighting and a faster shutter speed. A slightly overcast day is actually a perfect day for taking photos because you don't get the shadows. You get great lighting without the shadows. But if the sun is directly overhead, you'll get shadows that can kind of mess up the conformation or the illusion of the conformation of the animal. So early to mid-morning or mid-afternoon to early evening are your best times for taking photos for the lighting. Alicia, do we have, there we go. Okay, so here are some different levels of light in the appearance of a lamb. And so in this case, these were taken around the same time, or you have different times, slightly different times. So you have too dark, you really need some artificial light to help out that lamb. Or you need a slower shutter speed to be able to let more light into your camera. The middle photo, the lighting is kind of okay, but you have a setting sun that can cause some weird colors in the lighting. I'd really prefer a little bit earlier in the evening where you have a little bit more lighting for that. And then in the third camera, it's a little bit dark, but with a natural flash, you can see the lamb. My nitpick on this one is you don't see the lamb is not quite as clear. And so the different features of the lamb aren't quite as clear. You can't see the muscling as well because it's dark and you're using the flash. So you're better off on a slightly cloudy day when you have more lighting than you are using the flash of your camera. Okay, so here are some more pictures with different lightings. So top left, we have an animal that's set up pretty well, but because of the lighting, you can't see the muscling along his back very well. So it's distorting both the hair and the muscling, so you're not getting a very good look at that boer kid. Now, when we look at the alpine, the top right, it's a lovely alpine kid that's set up nicely. But because you have that direct sunlight on her, you have her color looks bleached out. So you really can't see. You get some optical illusions in there that kind of mess up her top line a little bit and in general mess up the picture. And then you have that nice shadow from her ear down her neck that distorts it a little bit more. And then in bottom left, you have a really uphill, looks like maybe a grayed doe, but very lovely doe, but you can't really see her because of the sun rays that distract from the animal. And then when we look at the bottom right, so we have a beautiful alpine type doe, and she's set up nicely. But again, the lighting doesn't help because she just kind of blends in with her background. She doesn't stand out. And so you can see in each of these pictures how the lighting affects the way the pictures look. And so we're going to see some natural lighting and artificial lighting. Actually, all of these are natural lighting. Oh no, the one on the right, that is artificial lighting in that barn that we saw earlier. So the ones on the left are natural lighting, and this lighting in all cases showcases the animals to their best. Now, if we look at the bottom left picture, what we see is we see a photo where the background was blurred out to kind of highlight the animal. And this is something we can do. It's unethical to Photoshop an animal to change the actual animal's appearance. It's just fine to use Photoshop or other programs to highlight the good features of the animal by removing distracting backgrounds. And so there's some gray areas, but this kind of Photoshop is fine, but you don't want to Photoshop an animal to try to level out a top line. It's pretty obvious when you do that. I mean, there's a picture that's been floating around the dairy goat world of a Photoshopped animal that has 3 legs as a result of the Photoshop being done poorly. And so that's kind of a running gag, but say don't Photoshop your animals to 3 legs. But the biggest thing, to me, this is the very biggest thing when you are photographing a goat or a sheep, is to make sure that you're photographing on their level. If you are looking, or if you're above the animal and you're looking down at them, it really does not look good on that animal. And so you want to kneel or squat so that you're level with the animal and the animal fills the frame. And you're pointing at the center of the animal's barrel. Or, there can be some angled shots that can be good too if you're trying to highlight the rear quarters or the forequarters of the animal. But for a good side view, you want your camera to be level and pointed at the center of the barrel and seeing all 4 legs. So in this case, we have slightly different positions in order to showcase the angle of the animal. So what I was talking about in the last slide, the one is going to showcase the level top line on the left and the strong feet and legs. So you're looking at this animal squarely on. And then with the one on the right, you're taking the photo from a bit of an angle behind the animal. So you're showcasing the stronger shoulder and the rump region of this animal. So both angles are perfectly fine depending on what you want to showcase. And so you will have to play around with angles. Okay, and now on the left here, we have a front angle where we're showcasing a powerful shoulder and the stance of this animal on strong feet and legs. And so you can see how that shoulder, pointing the camera at that shoulder at that slight angle is helping with that. And then we have this angle where we're coming at it directly from the rear, looking at the top of the animal. So in this case, we're showing that long, lean neck, we're showing the clean look, we're showing the nice width in the rump. And so sometimes a top view photo is appropriate, particularly if you're doing a virtual show where the judge needs to see the top line of the animal. And this can be a good advertising pose too, or position as well, if you're trying to showcase that animal's top line and the cleanliness throughout. So these two photos show the same doe at different angles. So if you look at the photo on the left, yeah, she looks like a nice doe, but she's not quite as deep looking or as powerful looking as you see in the photo on the right that was taken at the correct level, level with that doe. Yet it is a little bit harder on these Nigerians to try to get down to their level. It takes a little bit more work than it does with, say, a lamb or a Saanen. But also when you look at that second photo, you can see the udder better. And so the udder kind of gets lost when you're standing up and looking at that animal versus when you squat down and you're able to get that camera even with that animal. Okay, so now we're going to look at some specific animal details. So probably the easiest way to get a posed picture of a buck or a ram is to turn him loose in an area that has a good background and he's not quite familiar with it and wait for him to pee. So one trick is when you take a goat or a sheep to a new location, 90% of the time they're going to pee. And so when you have a buck or a ram that's peeing, they're going to stand stock still. And usually the front feet will be squared and the back feet will be slightly stretched and their head will be held high. And so you can actually get some pretty good shots of a buck or ram while they're peeing. And so take a look at some pictures. If you look online, you can probably find quite a few of them because people who have been doing this a while know that that's actually the best position to get a buck or ram in. And so you want to focus on power when you're looking at bucks and rams. So we think of power and masculinity. And so think about the stance on the strong feet and legs. So the one on the top left is probably our best shot overall. He's set up, he's square in the front. He's really showing the power of that front end. The one on the bottom left, I take a little bit of an issue with the angle that this is shot at, but you can still see the strength in the front, how focused he is, strength in the front end, and the strength in the top line. And so top right, we see a bottle buck, and this is another trick. If you have a bottle kid, a lot of times you can use that bottle to get them to square themselves and level themselves. And then the ram on the bottom right, he's really showing off that strong front end. This isn't my favorite picture because you lose those hindquarters, but if you're really trying to show off that chest, then this is a good angle. But you do lose the hindquarters in this picture, so it just kind of depends on what you're looking for. So when you're looking at dairy does, you need to look at the capacity of the udder. If you have a first freshening yearling, it may be 10 hours. But for most does that have been in milk for a little while, probably 14 to 16 hours of udder fill is going to give you the right capacity. So if you fill the udder too much, then you're going to end up with a steep rump because she's uncomfortable. So you want the udder full but not over full. You don't want it so full that she's uncomfortable. So you want it comfortably full. And so your handler needs to be able to hold that head high and keep the chain right behind the jaw. If the chain is sliding down the neck, you're not going to get a good picture. The handler should stand either next to the withers or the head, depending on the animal. And you want to hold your free hand either to your side or behind you. You don't want it to be distracting. One thing you can do to try to get them to level their top line is to put your fingers along the loin and move them back and forth with some pressure, and that will get them to flatten their top line. You want to make sure you take that hand away once the animal is pinched down, is what we call it. But it's not really a pinch. It's more of movement and pressure that gets her to level her top line. And so both of these photos highlight very beautiful animals at the American Dairy Goat Association National Show. You really see a difference in the handlers. So on the left, you can see how the handler's hand is near the doe's back. And that's where she leveled the top line and then moved her hand, but she didn't move it back all the way. And so it's distracting, and you know what she was doing. So the handler on the right, and part of it may be that this animal has a naturally better top line, but you don't notice that handler as much. And so the animal really pops out in that photo because the handler isn't distracting. So, some udder faux pas. What you don't want to do with a milking doe. So, you don't want to take an advertising photo while your doe is being milked by a machine, unless you're trying to show the inflation specifically on the machine. And with fore udders, you don't want to just advertise a fore udder photo unless you also have a rear udder photo to go with it. And please make sure your goat is clean. You don't want to have an udder photo that has birthing fluids or manure or other things on the udder. So these photos are showing the same doe. So you can see the entire rear udder on the left, but you can't see the teats on the right. So you can't really get a good idea of the teat placement. You have some idea. But also, the other thing that I have a problem with both of these photos is that the hair has not been clipped from these udders, or from the udder. You can't see the rear udder and how high the rear udder goes or the attachments very well because of the hair. And so if you're trying to highlight this udder, that hair really gets in the way. But you can see how the photo on the left does show the udder better than the one on the right. So again, when we were talking about angle before, so this is a La Mancha doe, and we see the same doe at different angles. You can highlight the doe with both angles, but you're looking at different parts of her. So the left photo, really highlights the udder, showing 1/3 behind the udder, 1/3 of the udder behind the leg, 1/3 of the udder in front of the leg, and 1/3 of the udder under the leg. So this doe has a really nice balanced udder, and we can see that in the side view. The photo on the right shows more length to that body. It elongates the body, and it gives you a good view of the rear udder. And so it makes her appear longer. It can also accent that long lean neck that she has, and it improves the look of her top line just a little bit. And so it just kind of depends on what you're going for in a particular photo. Some does will look great from one angle and not so great from another angle, and so you just have to play around with your angles. Okay, so let's talk about some market lambs and wethers. So when you're looking at a market lamb or a wether, you want to make sure you emphasize the powerful hindquarters. And so about 45 degrees toward the rear of an angle before you snap the picture can help really emphasize those hindquarters. And so the handler needs to know how you want that animal set up. And with any photo, you want to wear professional looking clothes and shoes. Make sure you're ready to be uncomfortable because bracing animals takes some strength and time. It really takes some patience too when you're trying to brace these animals, get them just right for the show or for the photography. So here are some photos that highlight the animals well. So we have a boer on the left, and we have a lamb on the right. And so we have a nice stance on both of these animals. And if you do not have a handler, a stand can be helpful, particularly with a market type animal. It's a little harder with a dairy animal when you're using a milking stand because the milk stand does not hold the head up. But when you have a fitting stand, that can work very well, particularly if you're trying to brace an animal without a helper. And sometimes you can have a great candid picture. And so that's the great thing about having smartphones is we always have a camera on us now. And so if you see a really great picture, just pull out your phone and take a picture. You could have a newborn lamb or kid. You might have 2 bucks that are squaring off. You might have a bunch of babies that are racing around. And so just kind of look for those opportunities to take great photos. There are all kinds of photo ops that are just there. Now, my problem is usually they're gone by the time I get my phone out and have the camera setting on. But here are some great pictures that you can take just by having your phone on you. And so here we see a buck kid that's just really standing nicely. And we were talking about taking a picture of one peeing earlier. That's one that where I caught him when he was peeing and got a great stance on him. We have a ewe eating dandelions, which is just kind of a cute picture. And you get a lot of cute pictures if you're just ready. Or the pink lips on the Toggenburg doe. So always be ready to take a picture. And some of them make great website pictures. Some of them can make great profile pictures on social media. Just always be prepared for that. And so, but most of the time, great photos don't magically happen. It takes practice and hard work to get those angles, to learn how to set them up for the photos. So if you see somebody that lives locally that has website photos that you really like, see if you can tag along when they're doing a photo day and learn how they're doing it. Because that's going to be your best bet for learning how to properly photograph sheep and goats. You may know somebody who's a great photographer, but they may not be very good at photographing livestock. So you want to find somebody who's good specifically with livestock. For me personally, even though I could probably set up the animal better than other people can, I prefer to be the one behind the camera because I know what I'm looking for in the photo. And so I prefer to have somebody else as a handler so that I can look at how that animal's set up and make sure that they're doing what I want them to be doing. Because I don't know how many times I've gotten upset with the pictures my husband has taken when I was the handler. And so I like to be in control of the camera when it comes to sheep and goats because nobody else has my eye and nobody else sees what I want to see. And so you're best off finding the handler that can handle them well and taking the photos yourself if you have a specific vision for your photos.
Yep, I agree. So that's my biggest thing too is my husband does okay on photos, but again, he doesn't always capture that look that I'm going
Exactly.
for the animals. So yeah, if you can find someone that you can work with well that follows what you want them to do well, it works out. It works out a lot better. So all right.
I'd like to thank you for joining us today. And if you have any questions, feel free to email us afterwards or send us your questions. So this is being recorded and it will be posted to YouTube tomorrow. So I don't see any questions, so we'll go ahead and close the webinar. Thanks for attending and we will see you next month.
All right. Thank you.